Welcome, everyone, to another wonderful podcast and another wonderful day with another beautiful lady who's with us here to educate us on something very special today. So I'm going to keep myself stum and I'm going to introduce her. Her name is Navi Hughes. Welcome, Navi Hughes. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm glad that you're here. So I'm looking forward to this one today. So I'm going to start off by saying, what do you do within your business to help people? And we'll take it from there.
Yes, so I am Navi Hughes. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. Um, I'm board certified and trained. Excuse me, let me back up.
That's cool.
Um, uh, Basically, I help people escape their mental prison. This goes through hybrid like coaching, therapy, and medication management. My top three diagnoses that I treat are ADHD, bipolar disorder, and PTSD.
Hmm. Sounds interesting. So, uh, plenty of stuff that you do there. So, the bipolar, I'm really interested in. Let's speak about bipolar. Just break down what bipolar is.
Yeah, so bipolar disorder, if you look at it, let's think of like a seesaw, right?
Uh,
For humans that individuals that don't have bipolar disorder, maybe you might have a little left shift or a little right shift, a little highs and lows. But
uh,
for people with bipolar disorder, it's an
mm,
extreme high, like really up, or extreme really down. So like it's always like on this pendulum that you just cannot get right.
mm,
And when you do get in this middle phase, you're almost paranoid that you feel normal, right? So it's
mm,
really difficult when you're feeling really like on top of the world. Like some people actually say, I feel like I'm on top of the world. I feel like God. I feel so good. Or they're completely irritated and restless. Like they just have this restless energy. And
mhm,
that can go on for days and days, even weeks. Or they're on the opposite end of it where they feel like the complete opposite. So you can go from like feeling like God to
mhm,
feeling like a little ant the next day. It's that
mm,
gap in that decline of energy that really like makes you feel miserable, like you don't want to exist. Um, and that's where we find where people don't want to live like that anymore. They don't want to go through the highs and lows. Most people come see me,
mhm,
not usually when they're in their highs. You know, we kind of ride the waves and try to get done as much as we can get done.
uh-huh,
But they come usually for outpatient treatment,
mm,
is usually when they're depressed. They show
mhm,
up to the hospital, maybe like psychosis.
mhm.
Um, but most of the time, it's when things are way like out of hand, is when they show up for treatment.
Okay, and bipolar, is it something that is triggered by an event? Is it something that you're born with? Is it
Mhm.
something that affects you because of the way you've eaten or your lifestyle? Just break down what it is with bipolar. What can and how do you get bipolar?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's this like I forget the statistics, but it's almost like 50, like it's like almost 60 to 85% genetic. It's
Mhm.
very,
Really?
yeah, it's highly heritable. So like let's say the people before us may have tried to mask it, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh,
We just say, oh, they were just angry. That was just them. And you might not know. A lot of us don't have that established history,
uh-huh.
our parents or anyone else, unless it was extreme, like psychosis.
Yeah.
Don't really have good history, but it is inherited. So, one, I don't want you to blame yourself for it, but I do want you to take accountability and get control of the symptoms.
Mm,
So, that it's hereditary. Yes, environment can have triggers. We find women in their 20s when it's their peak stress time,
mm-hmm,
either going to college or having, giving childbirth, something
mm-hmm,
like that, like a triggering event,
mm-hmm.
big stressors can trigger a flare up.
Hmm. But for that flare up to happen, they've had to have some form of that in them already, or you saying that they usually don't have bipolar, and it's just in a big event that can just set them into bipolar stage? How does that work?
Yeah. So science shows that we already have the genes for it. That's why
Okay.
it's so hereditary. They just get activated by our environment.
I
So
see.
certain stressors. So the more you take care of your environment, like
Yeah.
internally too and
Yeah.
externally, the less flare-ups you will have.
I see. So when they come to you and they've obviously usually in a state of depression and feeling really, really low, what do you do? Is it the first thing you do is try to look to see if there's history, and then see if from there working it backwards in, so to see if they can, because I take it bipolar isn't just a general blanket. It's different for everybody. So am I saying correctly that you look back into the person's history, see how the person before them was affected, and it gives you certain cues to help them to go forward? Or is it something else? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. All those are great points. One, we get a really thorough history.
Mm.
Most people can't really provide their family history.
Okay.
So I have to go off of their history of from the age of like 5 all the way up, as much as they can remember.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and I'm looking for significant mood swings or these different episodes that have occurred over their life, like highs, lows, these little even micro switches, because it can be different. You're correct that it's on a spectrum. So, and even so, in our psychiatry Bible, it's
mm-hmm,
called the DSM-5. It's a way of classifying things, so it kind of guides treatment. There's a lot
mm-hmm,
of controversy around it, but
mm-hmm.
the major thing is there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and a diagnosis that goes underdiagnosed, or it's called cyclothymia, and
Okay.
not enough people talk about it. So basically, it goes from very severe to mild.
Okay.
And when someone comes in, I get a history. Where it gets really tricky
Okay.
is when you use substances. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when we classify things, we're like, okay, well, let's say you used cocaine around the same time, like you had that high.
Yeah.
So we would assume it's the cocaine, right? Like it's the drug,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
But here's the thing. Sometimes a high came before, like slightly before, and you
mm-hmm,
feel so elated, you have this energy, and
mm-hmm.
you might participate in drug use because of that high. So I
Uh-huh.
really have to get like granular
Yeah.
how many times you've had these switches, whether it be mania or hypomania,
Yeah.
where or like cyclothymia, you're just having it for a few days. So the severity of it looks different
Mm,
for everyone, and that's why there's a huge stigma. The only time people recognize it is when it's so extreme and so out there, and you have to like there's no other explanation, right? So that's the only time we
mm,
believe these things, but they exist even in milder forms. I have
mm-hmm,
clients that are like C-suite clients or entrepreneurs. They have bipolar disorder. You
mm,
know, so it's like breaking that stigma that you are allowed to have it. I mean, it was given to you, right? Like it is okay. Part of it's acceptance, and that's the first step. Is
mm,
that's what my clients have a hard time with. Like, how could I have bipolar disorder? How could I be this way? But really, we're judging ourselves,
yeah.
and part of it is accepting. So I have to take a minute with my clients to give them the space to accept the
Mm,
diagnosis.
mm. And I take it with some clients, they take a very long time to accept. And when that happens, that must be very difficult for you to treat someone like that, because I suppose they're fighting against you, right? You're trying to help them and trying to get, number one, the information from their history, and they're fighting that because I don't have bipolar, right? So, and then it's a situation too, is, as you said, that they don't want to admit to it. So how do you actually communicate with someone to help them? Because remember, you can only help a person if they want help? That must be difficult. How do you go around that situation?
Yeah. So one, I have an unfair advantage. I love what I do. People come into me, they
Uh,
know they have a problem. So
uh,
I'm here to help you solve it. Like
uh,
that's number one, right? There we can agree that there's a problem.
okay.
And so I kind of build a foundation off that. Okay, well, you're having these things, and it is in my, I guess it's in my medical opinion, like it is my expert advice
Yes.
that you do have this. Now I'm going to illustrate to you how you do have this. Here's what occurred in this time frame,
Uh-huh.
and here's how we classify it as. So we take the judgment out. I also have a relatability factor
Mm-hmm.
that also allows me to connect with people. So in my family, there's a history of bipolar disorder.
Ah,
And my mom has bipolar disorder. So I understand what it's like to live with someone that has bipolar disorder. Like I understand. So that relatability factor helps
mhm.
me out so much more than just education and being matter of fact, because there also has to be this human touch, right? For you to
Mm,
accept it. And that really helps. And also I give them the time. I give them the option. Like I tell them, you are the expert in your life. It is your decision whether you want to take the medications or not.
mhm, mhm,
Because I'm not taking the medication, you are. So you really have to, one, first is accept the diagnosis. Two, we set up the environment when you can take your meds. Like
mhm.
it doesn't take a lot of, I guess, willpower.
Uh-huh.
You just change your environment. You put your meds where you need to. You put your water where you need to. You make it a part of your daily habit. So it's this whole transition of acceptance to how do I actually execute this? And
Uh-huh.
then I give them a period for relapse. It's okay because they will start feeling good and not take the medication. It's human nature.
I
Nobody
get
wants to be on medication, right?
that.
Nobody wants to need a
No,
crutch,
I
right?
get it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But part of it's just accepting it and surrendering to
Yeah.
it. Like,
Mm,
it's like picking your poison. Do I want to live with what I've been living with for years, or do I want to do something different and
mm.
change it? And it really comes down to that question.
Okay, you said that your mother's got bipolar, and did you say you have bipolar?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this is where the genetic thing is coming into it. So okay, you can blame your mother, right? You can say, "Mum, it's your fault," right? So okay, so let's talk about that. I mean, when you was growing up, it must have been quite difficult for you for certain things happening within yourself and within your mother. So what? Just tell me what triggers that were happening as you were growing up from bipolar, so people can,
Yeah.
really connect with that.
So as far as my mom goes,
Mm,
there was a lot of abuse and neglect at the same
mhm,
time. So
mhm,
neglect when she was in her depressive episodes, there was no connection. You
mhm,
know, when you're all the way from birth to like I would say like 9, like you're
mm,
forming all these connections, this
mm,
bond, this attachment style. So mine was really impacted, and I feel like it caused a delay in my growth
mhm,
because I didn't have that. It was very unpredictable. And during her manic phases, and there was psychosis involved, a lot of impulsive behaviors.
mhm,
And that was the unpredictability time. That was the time, she stopped taking her meds. And that was a scary time. So you just kind of live on life on edge. And you just think everyone's like this,
mm,
right? Like everyone's either high or they're low. It's just another day.
mm, mm.
Right. So you kind of get in that mindset, and that alone is traumatic for a child.
Yeah, because a child needs consistency, don't they? They need something to really grab onto, and so that was very difficult for you. So, um, obviously, you didn't know. Well, you didn't know any different. A child is a child. If your environment is as such, whatever that such is, that's all you know, right? So,
Exactly.
when did it come about when you thought something wasn't quite right? Because as far as you was concerned as a child growing up, this is what life is all about, and it's okay because this is life. But when did it hit one day when something wasn't right? Was you in a situation with your peers, or when you went over to stay with a few friends and you may have thought, well, how comes my life is different compared to others? What was it that triggered you and you thought, something's not quite right?
Right. So I think as a child, there's a level of acceptance. Like, this is what it is, right? It's just the way it is. But then there's this inner knowing, like this intuition. So it's like, something's not right. Like, why does it have to be like this? Especially if you're the rebel middle child, which I am.
Ah, okay.
And you look at all the other children. Well, there's Ashley next door. Ashley gets all this love. Her mom spent time with her. Her mom does her hair. They go out together. Why don't I have that? You know, why doesn't my mom love me in the same way? Why do I get all this hate? Especially like during the manic episodes, her words cut like a knife.
Yeah.
And so it perpetuated this whole cycle of self-hate, which I've had to work on years and years to kind of get rid of. But it's hard when it becomes your own voice. Like, it literally becomes your own voice. Like, you're not pretty enough. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You don't look like this beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful girl next door, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I struggled with her. But with me, I had no idea, because it wasn't so severe. I wasn't psychotic. I wasn't having these big, distinct switches.
Okay.
To my knowledge. Okay. To my knowledge. But hindsight 2020, I actually was.
That was very difficult for you to find out something wasn't right with yourself. So, as you said, you particularly didn't have these big swings like your mother. So what made you to get diagnosed yourself? What changed for you to think, I think I've got a bit of that, considering that you didn't have these huge swings? So when did that change? When did that change up?
I think it just compiled. It compiled. When I was a child, I ran away a lot, right? So there were mood swings there that impacted my behavior. Then there was a teenage pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then I dropped out of school, went back to school. There's all these changes. And then I lost my husband. And then I went back to school. I had my third child. And it just never dawned on me, or I didn't even want to admit it, or it didn't even like register like I could have a problem, because I'm like, I'm so resilient. You know, you have your resilient mask on, and it just gets hidden in there until it starts showing up in panic attacks. Like, you're helping clients and you can't fully be present because you feel like your whole world's shaking while they're talking, and you're having this internal panic attack. And I'm like, okay, I can handle the panic attacks. Fine. I'll deal with them. But then one night, we had to call the ambulance. I never call the ambulance like on myself. And I felt every nerve in my body, like I could feel it in my spinal cord, every nerve traveling up to the back of my brain. Like, I was losing it. I was in fetal position. And the 5 people come up with the gurney. And this guy is making me do like whatever, like he's doing his neuro stroke checks, and I feel like I'm doing the Macarena.
Oh, God.
And the other one's trying to check, how my heart is doing, because I was having chest pressure.
Yeah.
And I grabbed the leads. I'm like, nothing's wrong with my heart. And I'm putting them on me because I'm a medical professional and I know how to put the leads on. It's just in this chaotic event, like they tell me, I think you're just having an anxiety attack.
Okay.
And this is at 3 a.m. Everyone's sitting around me, like 5 guys, my husband, 2 kids. And it was that moment of, okay, I got to do something about this. So I started therapy.
Okay.
I didn't think I needed it because I was that typical person. Everyone around me needs to change. I don't need it. Like, I'm doing great, So it's just that story you keep telling yourself that I kept telling myself. So it was until that time I started therapy, and I would notice myself, I'm like, I just told my therapist this today, but 2 weeks later, I'm like, I'm fine. And I told my therapist this today. I'm like bawling in her room, and then I'm fine. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get help. So I went and saw a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And after that, she prescribed medication. I didn't take it for the first 6 months. I was like, I knew better. I was a mental health professional at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, okay, I'll take the medicine, for a couple months. And I just stopped taking it and then took it. And I was getting into, over all this time, there's been many repercussions, financial
Okay.
repercussions, with relational issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I could just never be at peace. That was the biggest one.
Mm,
And looking back, it's like a life full of regrets, which is mostly what my patients go through. I mean, I
yes.
have people in their 70s, they just regret it every day. And I knew I didn't want to I wanted to stop living a life full of regrets. So I just decided to trust the process and take the meds.
And that helped you when you did that and you was consistent taking the meds.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that's the only thing,
Okay.
because I changed everything because of it, because I actually committed. So social rhythms therapy
Uh-huh.
is a whole different thing. Basically, it's getting on a consistent schedule, sleep wake cycle,
Okay.
making sure you have a structure for your day. Now you're allowed to have flexibility, but it's more about consistency.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
that's
that was,
interesting. That's really interesting. Let's talk about more the social rhythm because the therapies would be interesting to talk about. So let's speak about the because it sounds quite unusual. It sounds like all you have to do is find a party and then you're social and you're okay. I'm sure there's more to it than that. So I'm not going to simplify it like that. I'll leave it to the expert like
yeah, no,
yourself.
that's quite the opposite, but yeah.
Exactly. I thought it might be. So yeah, let's hear from you. What does social therapy mean?
Yeah, so in a sense, it's just basically creating a stable daily routines, sleeping, eating, working, and just balancing that your life. Also, obviously, social activities, because that's good for the brain, but it's balancing these activities. So, where you're not sleeping too much, you're not sleeping too little. You're not
Mm,
eating too much, you're not eating too little. You're not working too much, and you're not working too little. And you have some type of social life as well. For me, that's important. So, it's all about the balance, and that is hard. It's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's easy now. It's second nature. Like, I know my body knows how much sleep it needs. I know if I overeat.
mm,
So it was training myself to do that, is to
mm,
come up with schedules, just a framework
mhm,
to
mhm,
keep you consistent. But you can allow some flexibility in there as well. But for the most part, you want stability, and it is through social rhythms that you get stability, like emotional stability.
mm,
And it helps prevent these ups and downs in your mood. You get better sleep, reduce stress, fewer mood swings. I would say it complements medications as well, because when you're supposed to take your medicine, there's like a schedule for it,
mm,
and
mhm.
compliance rate and success rate goes up.
This is really interesting. So it just basically is having a balance in every part of your life, not over or underdoing anything whatsoever. But I'm guessing that is different for everybody. There's just not one framework and you apply it to everybody. I'm guessing you have to adjust it to the individual person. Is that correct?
Absolutely, you make a great point. Yeah. So everyone comes in, they're doing different things. They have different jobs. They're at a
Mm,
different place in their life. They might have kids or not have kids. It's very individualized. So I have to look at your schedule, and we actually get granular. Like, hey, how do your days look like? How
mm,
can I support you in coming up with a schedule that works for you? Like, for example, for my mom, she does not work, but she does meditate like 2 to 3 hours a day. And
mhm,
if she gets away from that, she starts cycling more, like cycling, meaning like having a lot of highs and lows.
mhm, mhm,
But if she maintains that, rhythm for herself,
Mm-hmm.
she's more likely to just stay emotionally stable, which is where we want her to. So she
Mm.
keeps her schedule balanced.
Okay. Now, the social therapy. Now, you not only just deal with bipolar, but I take it that therapy could be used for other things or for other
Absolutely.
situations, whatever. So it's not just specific for bipolar, but it helps for other ailments.
Yeah. So, we have to come up with a fancy name for everything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But it basically just goes down to, hey, are you sleeping okay? Are you getting movement?
yeah.
Are you eating well? So sleep. So for everyone that comes in, I have to assess their sleep,
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, and exercise.
Mm.
And are they balancing everything else? Like sometimes too much social time's not good for you. You're not resting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Too much alone time is not good for you. So
Mm.
it's just, what are you doing that's so extreme that we could kind of tone back? But the basic three pillars are always sleep, exercise, and nutrition.
Okay, so we've done the social therapy. What other therapy is there to help with bipolar?
Yeah, so I have studied dialectical behavior therapy. The component I would like to pull out of that is emotional regulation, like coping skills that
Mm-hmm.
you can do to calm your body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's so many different skills, right? But DBT teaches us that. Originally, it was created for people with borderline personality disorder, but it's great for people with ADHD. It's great for people with bipolar disorder because all of them share this emotional dysregulation component that
Mm-hmm.
it can definitely help with. So, a lot of my clients, I refer them out to a therapist that specializes in DBT, even in, I guess, let's say trauma as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just break it down, the DBT, because I'm still not quite sure what that means in real terms. So you've got to speak to me layman, otherwise I just won't get you and the rest of the listeners. So what does that mean in real terms? What does that really look like? So, for instance, let's make up a persona. Someone's come to you in a particular way.
Mhm.
How can DBT help? How's that applied?
Yeah. So let's say you come in with, let's say, mood swings, right? Or your
Uh,
issue, right? And then we decide that your diagnosis is
mhm,
bipolar 2 disorder, okay?
mhm, mhm,
And you're having trouble regulating your stress levels. Like,
mhm,
so anything outside of you, maybe your fridge broke down, you're having plumbing issues, right? You attach
mhm,
that emotion, like, we all get angry, there's a little bit of upset, but then you attach a feeling to it, and this feeling's like, man, I'm not going to be able to do this, like I am just having this meltdown, I'm annoyed, I'm angry, I'm all these feelings. So usually they
mhm,
stick with those feelings, and then those feelings can lead to a huge, like, my mom would call them brain attacks, but a manic period, right?
mhm.
Because you've let that fester for so long, you
Uh,
prolong that stress in your body, in your mind,
uh,
and now you're going to have this big, huge attack. So
yes.
DBT comes in to kind of help you look at what would your logical mind and your emotional mind come up with together for that situation. So yes, maybe your fridge broke down or you're having
Mhm,
plumbing issues, but
mhm,
yes, also, can you get through it? Is it true it's going to ruin your life?
mhm,
Probably not. So it's like using two different parts of your mind to make a wise mind decision, the
mhm,
logic side
mhm,
and the emotional mind to make a wise decision, because we can't ignore the emotional side and we can't ignore the logical side. So it's like combining those two. And
mhm,
then you go through, which is part of my emotional intelligence course, is
mhm,
emotional regulation techniques of how can I effectively carry this out so I don't go in through these episodes of high stress, prolonged stress,
mhm.
going through all these hypomanic and manic and depressive phases, all because those emotions built up and spiraled out of control.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, I understood that, so thank you for putting it in layman terms. Any other therapies that will be interesting to learn about?
For the most part, it would be for bipolar disorder. I would say that those are my main like top favorites. But with bipolar disorder, when you have to remember when you are in an
Mm.
episode of hypomania or mania, there is really no therapy that can, I guess, talk you out of it.
Ah,
Because the feeling is so real. Like if I want to go buy that $100,000 piece of land or whatever that decision is, the feeling is so strong.
mm-hmm.
Most of the therapy that's going to work is medication to kind of lower or balance that down. Like that feeling of
Yeah,
you just have to do this,
yeah,
whatever that impulsive choice is. Now, if you feel it coming on, yes, I tell my clients, hey, sedate yourself, go to bed at night, reset your brain,
yeah.
make sure if you're feeling that high energy come along, de-stress yourself, do those emotional regulation skills, like tap into your vagus nerve, which means like take some deep breaths, put an ice pack on your back right here, whatever it takes to calm your nervous system down,
Mm-hmm.
and then go to sleep so you can have a better day. It's like just resetting, I guess,
Mm,
the
mm.
hardware.
No, I know, I understand what you're saying there. That's really, really intense. So, bipolar one or two, what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, so there is a big difference. So bipolar 1, you can have depressive episodes, but you definitely don't have to
Okay.
qualify for the diagnosis.
Uh-huh.
But it's more if that episode lasted for 7 days,
Mm,
meaning the severity of it was long,
mm-hmm.
or if you ended up hospitalized because of it,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're having psychosis because of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about that severity of it. And the way we classify is 7 or more days of that high energy episode where you're not sleeping okay, you're taking on new projects, maybe you're irritable, maybe you feel like you're on top of the world.
Mm, mm.
Um, and we look at timeline.
Right. Okay. So this the severe part of it is number one, and the
Mhm.
less severe is number two.
So, but yes, bipolar 2 disorder, the way we qualify for that diagnosis or the criteria, I would say, is
Uh-huh.
there's a high and then there's a low, at least for 4 days or so. Like we give these rigid lines, but it
Yeah.
really looks different.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that.
But at least, 4 days of having this high swing where
Yeah.
your sleep is affected. I've had a patient build a whole pond, like a frog pond in the back over like
Uh-huh.
4 days. And then, so you take on all these projects, you're going. Maybe you got 3 hours of sleep and you still feel energized. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's a switch, and then comes a depressive episode. And
Mm,
that is really hard for people because that's where their guilt kicks in, regrets kick in. You're like, I was this person yesterday. I started all these things, but
mm,
now I'm just down, depressed, paralyzed in bed. Like I feel worthless. So
mm,
that is more like bipolar 2. I feel like bipolar disorder, it's near and dear to my heart because it's one of the hardest disorders to live with and to treat because it impacts on every single level. And as far as down for like, if you talk about the neurotransmitters,
uh-huh.
it involves many different ones, unlike depression
Mm,
and like, stress disorders. So bipolar disorder is kind of all of that. It hits your dopamine levels. Like sometimes you have so much that
mm-hmm.
you could be in that hyperactive state. You could be in that psychosis,
Mm,
or you don't have any at all. And we're trying to give you medication to regulate that dopamine, trying to depress it, but then you're in a state of depression
mm,
and your serotonin levels are all off too. Your norepinephrine levels are imbalanced. There's a stress response. And then the GABA is a molecule that helps kind of calm you down.
uh-huh.
That is off. It's imbalanced. And then your glutamate receptors, which don't get enough attention, they're like the exciting cells. They're off. So when you're manic, they're high and then they get low. There's just so much imbalance. Now, we
Mm,
don't have a true understanding of how every transmitter is affected, but we do have somewhat of an understanding through medication, because when I give you a dopamine antagonist, your psychosis symptoms go down, but then your depression symptoms are not there. So it's like having this really good, like a drug, a medications, like having this really good software. It does these main three things. Like, one, it'll get rid of psychosis. Two, it'll get rid of suicidality,
mm,
and maybe you're not spending all your money, like less impulsivity. But then also maybe you don't have the other components and you got to buy these integrations, these little pieces.
mm,
Maybe you're still feeling depressed, right? Maybe your quality of life is still low. So then you still have to rely on other medications
mm,
to treat the rest of the symptoms. And that's where psychiatry gets tricky. It's like, man, you're on so many meds. It's because with bipolar disorder, it is really tricky to treat it with just one medication.
mm, mm. Yeah,
That doesn't mean I haven't been successful. It just means it's a lot harder for that particular diagnosis.
it seems like it's really complex to help someone with bipolar, to be honest, because it's unique to every single person, especially when you were speaking from the point of view the social therapy. And obviously that's got to be unique to every single person, because what is what one person is very good at and is very strong at, and then they have this lows in other social how can I say social situations. Another person completely different, or they have issues with food, or whatever the case may be. So it is a very tricky diagnosis. And is it quite difficult to diagnose compared to other, such as ADHD, autism, etc.? And why is it more tricky than the others?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a twofold question. It's a great question, though. So let's say you have depression symptoms, right? You might just go to your general practitioner and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm
Uh-huh.
depressed and feeling down." So they might just give you give you an antidepressant like
That's
Prozac.
right.
And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm
Hmm.
taking it. The thing with Prozac is, if you have bipolar disorder, it can trigger more swings. It can actually worsen your symptoms. So in the medical field, your general practitioners aren't trained to do that thorough screening. So when people come to me, is I am biased because I already know how it looks. It's easy for me to diagnose.
Mm.
So my sample size is a lot different than most people's. It's because, it's this familiarity. You
Yes.
track to, my bio and everything. Like, I have positioned myself as, here's how I help you, and here are the diagnosis. So when people come to me, I have that trained eye to
Uh-huh.
look for that, because it's what's familiar to me. And it makes it a lot easier. Makes it a lot easier for me
Of
to help
course.
someone. So when I say, if you're not getting the right answers, always find a specialist if you're
Mm.
lost.
Mm. And obviously, you're the right person because you're living it, right? So, of course, you see the patterns straight away. And a lot of the time, you don't have to ask many questions because you go, I've heard this before. I see this in you, and everything else. So, what if someone suspects they've got bipolar? What should they do? What's the first thing they should do?
The first thing that they can do is, one, fix their I want them to fix their sleep, at least getting 8 hours. If they're not getting sleep, then we
Mm,
need to get you the medication. Make sure you're eating 2 to 3 meals a day. Make sure you're getting exercise. Those are things that don't cost you much and you
mm,
can do at home.
mm,
Because when you come into my office, I'm going to ask you to work on that anyways.
mm, mm,
Now, obviously, when you're depressed or you're in a manic episode, you can't do all these things.
mm,
So
mm,
in that state, you need to come in. You need to get help. Obviously, if you're having psychosis, it's a severe, like, you need to go to the hospital. It's very severe. But if you're just going through the mood swings and you just feel like, man, I don't know who I'm going to be when I wake up tomorrow, and it's just painful, you need to get help. See
mm,
a psychiatrist.
mm,
See a therapist. You could even start there. And they can kind of, if you don't know, you can start with a therapist. Now, can they provide all the treatment for you? No, but just like you saw me going to a therapist, and I'm like, why am I like this one day? And another day I'm telling her, you know, this, I'm two completely different people. Scary, but you can see that because this is a not like unbiased person. You can see your behaviors. They can help you figure it out. But definitely, as far as I know, for bipolar disorder, its medication is the treatment if you don't want the highs and the lows and you want to be emotionally stable.
Okay, and does this affect men and women differently, or is it much so?
You know, our research is biased. I'm going to tell you that. Most people I interact with are women. And that's what I've noticed. When I have had men come in, it's more socially accepted. Oh, they're just irritated, or they just drink. That's just, it's masked. It's masked a lot. And you're not, as men, you're not allowed to be emotionally vulnerable. You're not allowed. Society doesn't say you can cry. Society doesn't say you can be sad or you can be happy. It's just like you have to maintain this stoic personality, which masks the symptoms. Because you just have to carry on through life and be a man.
No, I get that. So when you find men coming to you, what is the difference between the man and the woman? When a woman comes to you, they're more open. When a man comes to you, they're more offish or not?
Most men that come to me are ready for treatments. They bring a journal, they take notes, they're ready because they've already accepted it. But now I help a lot more women and children than I do men. And we're trying to make mental health mainstream. I want men to know that they are allowed to be vulnerable. They are allowed to have emotions. You just don't want to wake up one day and not enjoy your life. And then you see it play out in other ways. Like you have this existential life crisis. And it's just better to get on top of it, get the treatment, feel connected to your spouse, feel connected to life around you, to your kids, and actually live a happy life. Like you can have that.
No, for sure. I can hear that. So if you had one thing to say and one piece of gold to a bipolar person, what would you say? I know that's restricted. I know that's tight. Wait, that one thing.
That one thing. I would say try the medications. If they don't work for you, you can always switch your medications. You can always find a better medication. I would say for people with bipolar disorder, if you want to take control of your life, the medications are not a bad thing. They're not going to change your personality. We don't want them to change your personality, but they're definitely worth a shot.
And with that said, thank you. Thank you for being on here. That's going to help a huge amount of people. How are people to get in touch with you if they need the support and the help?
Yes, absolutely. You can go to my website, navihughes.com. You can also follow me on social media. I have a free de-stress guide to help busy professionals kind of keep calm and even keyed. So yes, navihughes.com. You can see more about my practice at empowermental.net as well. If you're in Texas or Oregon, I can help you. But in other ways I can help you is through emotional intelligence coaching as well.
So you can help people online if need be. Perfect. Nice to hear that. Now, you hear that, listeners. Navi actually has lived what you potentially are going through yourself. If you potentially could have bipolar, you think you may or you do, and you need some support, and she resonates with you. Now, look at her history. She knows how to navigate it. She has a family history in it, and she has a love for helping people. The reason being is because she's had to live it herself. So, who better to go to than Navi? And all you've got to lose is just time itself. Wouldn't it be better just to have that conversation? Wouldn't it, Navi, to have a conversation?
Absolutely. It's an investment.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. Navi, thank you for being with us. I really do appreciate the time to help us and to educate us. I really do appreciate you.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
And listeners, I'll have all the links down below so you can contact Navi and click away and make sure you subscribe and like and all those wonderful things. And sayonara. Here we go, Navi. I know your time is limited, so I had to cut it short. So I apologize for that. But
Yeah, of course.